Welcome to Huff Goes to the Movies. My name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff, and some people know that I love going to the movies. Fast X hits theaters on May 19th as the 11th installment of the Fast and Furious franchise. Every week leading up to then, I've been revisiting a different film in the franchise in release order, and then reviewing it here in a series called Toretto Tuesdays. This week, we are taking a bit of a detour from the main Fast saga, and we're talking about the spin-off film Hobbs and Shaw, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Jason Statham. Hobbs and Shaw are both characters who originated in previous installments in the Fast and Furious franchise, both as antagonists, oddly enough. The Rock came in to Fast 5 as the person trying to track down Dom and Brian and Mia, and then Jason Statham came into Furious 7 as Deckard Shaw, looking to get revenge against the family for what they did to his brother, who was the villain in the previous Fast installment. But after the events of Fate of the Furious, which saw Jason Statham and The Rock both being put in prison and then being let out and being forced to work together, that on-screen chemistry that we saw in Fate of the Furious is now sort of being given its own lane, no pun intended, to drive in with Hobbs and Shaw. And in this film, both Hobbs and Shaw have to team up to take down Brixton, played by Idris Elba, a superhuman who is bent on releasing a deadly virus into the world. And because this film came out before the COVID-19 pandemic, probably kudos to the producers here for good timing on this release date, because this would probably have been changed had it been due for a 2020 release. This film caused quite a bit of controversy with members of the Fast and Furious franchise. Tyrese sort of infamously made fun of the opening weekend and blamed The Rock for trying to take away the shine from the Fast and Furious franchise. The release date of this film actually pushed back the release date for F9, though in the end, I don't know that it really made much of a difference. I think that people would have felt the same way about either of these films, and F9 actually was positioned quite nicely considering it was that first major blockbuster that brought people back to the theater in 2021. But Hobbs and Shaw sort of fit perfectly into that summer of 2019, since they were dealing with a superhuman, and this was the year where we were getting Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, and probably some other superhero movies that I have long forgotten about. So it really did fit. And I think that when it comes to the rest of the Fast and Furious franchise, Hobbs and Shaw fully embraces the ridiculous, absurd, scientifically inaccurate action. There are scenes of people running down the sides of buildings. There are cars who are inexplicably doing full flips. There's a superhuman. There are people pulling helicopters. I mean, it's pretty nuts. And while I think The Rock and Jason Statham are both very charming lead personalities for action films, I think that Hobbs and Shaw is a movie that is a little too artificial for its own good. And I think that at times this doesn't become an extension of the Fast and Furious franchise. It kind of comes across as The Rock wanting to throw his friends and family a big party on screen. Everything from some of the cameos that happen in this film to the entire third act taking place in Samoa and it becoming a whole thing about Samoan traditional warfare. I mean, listen, I am happy that The Rock is in a position where he can put Samoa on the map, but also, is that Hobbs or is that The Rock? And it's a shame because I think that this film actually proves that the Fast and Furious franchise could branch off and focus on just some of the characters that we usually get in the larger ensembles. So a character like Letty could probably be primed for her own spin-off film. A character like Tej could probably be primed for his own spin-off. But Hobbs and Shaw sort of had the raw star power of Dwayne Johnson behind it. And if I'm remembering correctly, I don't even think Neil Moritz, who had been the producer of the Fast and Furious franchise from its inception, I don't even know if he's officially given a credit here, which is interesting considering that Chris Morgan, who wrote Fast and Furious 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, was the screenwriter here and one of the producers here, but he did not come back for F9, even though that's the film that Justin Lin, who directed 3, 4, 5, 6, came back for. So there's a lot of interesting bits of movement behind the scenes on a film like this. And of course, At this point, The Rock and Vin Diesel had fallen out during the production of Fate of the Furious, and so this film doesn't even really mention any of the events of the previous films. We do get some nods, but overall, this kind of just feels like a generic, over-budget Netflix movie. I mean, that's sort of the feel that you get watching a movie like this. And the film was directed by David Leach, who previously went as an uncredited co-director on the first John Wick film. His more recent films include Bullet Train, and I believe he also did Atomic Blonde. Don't quote me on that. But he's an action director. He's a big, stylish action director. And while I think it would be great for David Leitch to direct a Fast and Furious film, this is Fast and Furious in name only. I think that the biggest weakness of Hobbs and Shaw is that it doesn't really feel like anything. It doesn't feel like it's a part of this franchise. It is just The Rock throwing himself a fireworks show. And I like The Rock, but also, why? But a standout in this film is actually Vanessa Kirby. She plays the sister of Deckard Shaw. She has the virus that Idris Elba's character is trying to unleash upon the world, so he is hunting her down, and she is now sort of having to stick beside The Rock and Jason Statham for her own protection, even though she kicks a fair bit of ass in this movie herself. But other than Vanessa Kirby, I just feel like so much of this movie was The Rock saying, you know what would be a lot of fun if I called my friend blank and had them show up for a cameo. You know what would be a lot of fun if we dug into my Samoan roots. The Hobbs character, I think, functioned best as an antagonist, and while I did like how he teamed up with the family in Fast and Furious 6, I was kind of glad that he was sidelined for Furious 7. I think that that film worked much better just focusing on sort of the core family group of characters. And even though they added to that ensemble in the form of Ramsey, I just felt like that was a story that didn't need Dwayne Johnson in it. And for him to be such a big part of Fate of the Furious and for his feud with Vin Diesel to really influence a lot of how that film came together, for him to have his own film after all of that just seemed so wrong. I mean, I guess it was an obvious decision as far as making money. He's one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, and this movie definitely did well at the box office. But for him to have his own vehicle, no pun intended, after all the drama that had happened and after the franchise sort of went through a bit of an evolution with him starting as an antagonist, I don't know, man. This just felt like a misstep. And I'll go a step further and say that while a lot of people malign entries like Fast and Furious and F9, I'm willing to say it. I think Hobbs and Shaw is the worst film in the franchise. Maybe my attitude will change after watching F9, but for now, I think this feels like the biggest abandonment to what these films had evolved into. This just feels like mindless, big, expensive action. And while I enjoy some mindless action myself, this film doesn't really have any of the tone or any of the sincerity that I think has worked for the Fast and Furious films up to this point. Even the films that aren't great have that bit of sincerity to them that still kind of makes you root for the characters. And I did not find myself doing that at all in this film. Though I did find myself rooting for Vanessa Kirby to kick ass because she's kind of good at it. So overall, Hobbs and Shaw, I think, is quite the letdown for the franchise, and if I were to recommend this franchise to anyone, I would probably just not even mention that Hobbs and Shaw exists. Like, if they find out on their own, cool, but other than that, I think it's non-essential viewing. And for all these reasons, I would probably say that Hobbs and Shaw is maybe a 2 out of 5 star. Not completely terrible, but also just flat out not good. Definitely the worst of the franchise, in my opinion. And going into the series, if someone had asked me what the worst one was, I would have definitely said Fast and Furious, and not Hobbs and Shaw. But things change, opinions change. Now that I've got a fresh set of eyes on all of these films, I'm ready to say it. Hobbs and Shaw is at the bottom of the list. And no one should watch it, and someone should Thanos snap it out of existence as far as I'm concerned. But that is just me. Guys, what are your thoughts on Hobbs and Shaw? Join me in the comments below. Let me know what you think. How does it compare to the rest of the series for you? If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That way you can stay up to date on everything that I've got going on here. Next week, we go to places we never thought we would go with F9, the Fast Saga, as it is sort of officially titled. I can't wait. And then after that, FX will be here before you know it. Again, be sure to follow the Toretto Tuesday series. At the end of this, not only will I have reviews for all the films, but I'll be ranking all of them from the worst to the best. I cannot wait. The support for this channel, just off of this series, has been incredible. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in, everyone who has subscribed, everyone who has shared this with other people. It means the world to me. But once again, my name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff. Salute me familia. I will see you at the movies. Peace.